You can never rest on your laurels. There's always the next company that is going to disrupt you. What made us relevant last year is not going to make us relevant this year.
What was the biggest learning that you had from Marc Benioff when you were working directly under him?
Other than trust is alignment. It's how we run our company. Everybody's got a shot. That's what I think is so exciting about Silicon Valley right now. If you're leading a software company or you're a CEO in the industry, you got to think, is AI going to eat my lunch? And if so, I better be the guy to build it than to watch another startup do it. It's life or death as a startup. I need these customers more than they need me. I'm never going to forget how important the obsession on customers should be to a software company, because it should be our job to earn the renewal.
Trust is the currency of business.
No matter how big or how small you are, you always have a shot.
Behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Before we dive into today's episode, I want to welcome everyone back from the holidays. Most people know that I am almost always on, regardless of holidays, but I certainly am not checking emails as much as I normally would. I do my best to be present around friends and family. And this year I came back to work and had so many emails in my inbox. The number was pretty terrifying. But since I started using Superhuman last quarter, I was actually able to get back to inbox zero within like 20 minutes. It helps me and the team be so much more productive. Honestly, don't know how I didn't start on Superhuman sooner. I used to be an inbox zero kind of guy, but as my personal media presence, the fund, and our community grew, it became harder and harder to actually make that happen. But I started on Superhuman. It was the most seamless onboarding experience. Everything in my inbox synced within minutes. Superhuman works with your existing Gmail or Outlook accounts. They actually studied the most efficient people and built the habits that they use right into their platform. The intentionality behind the product absolutely blew me away, even down to the analysis of proximity of your fingers to which keys so that the shortcuts you use can be as efficient as possible. I love to see leaders implementing this kind of best-in-breed solution for their teams, allowing them to simplify and in turn speed up efficiency. I would have loved to have this in my sales days or when I was leading my teams. It would have been an absolute game changer, helping me to better manage emails, to prioritize quick responses, collaborate with other stakeholders, and of course, close deals faster. For anyone that knows me personally, you know that I hate the admin side of sales. It was never my favorite. I want to be in front of customers, prospects, and I've always tried to spend as much time as I can helping interesting people solve interesting problems. So if I was on Superhuman then, cutting back all the unwanted admin, I could have gone from stage one to closed one way, way quicker and wouldn't have had as many late nights doing inbox warfare and admin catch up. That being said, second best time is now, so I'm all in. New year, time to take back control of my inbox. And 2025 is the year of inbox zero for me. If anyone else wants to take back control of their inbox and empower their teams to do so as well, Superhuman is generously offering the GTM Now community exclusive access to 1 month free on the platform. And if you add any teammates in January to your team, they will also get a free month as well. So to join for free, go to superhuman.com/GTM now. That's superhuman.com/GTMNOW. Check out Superhuman at superhuman.com. Hello and welcome back to the GTM podcast. As always, you have Scott Barker here. And thank you so much for lending us your eardrums each and every week. This is going to be a really fun conversation. And I've, as many times, I've been super excited for this one. But I'm joined by Kraig Swensrud. Kraig, welcome to the show, man.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
Pumped to have you, man. And what an incredible career and entrepreneurial journey you've had, and super excited to dive in. But, I like to start with a quick bio for our listeners. So Kraig is what you would call a serial entrepreneur. He is currently the founder and CEO at Qualified. Previous to that, Kraig was the founder of GetFeedback, which was acquired by SurveyMonkey in 2019. And then before that, he served as the CMO of just a small company you may have heard of called Salesforce, where he was responsible for driving really the whole global corporate and product marketing functions and led the team during a time period where Salesforce was really going through hypergrowth, and you could say they're still going through hypergrowth. But really excited to dive into your journey. So how many companies have you built now? What number is Qualified?
Qualified's number three. Number three. Yeah, I'm old enough to have been around the industry for as long as kind of the internet has impacted enterprise software. So I feel like I've seen a lot and done a lot, but starting a company is definitely hard. And we're about 7 years into Qualified. So for your listeners out there, Qualified's a pipe gen platform, and we're kind of disrupting the status quo in marketing with pipe gen using an AI SDR agent. We've got a few hundred employees, nearly 1,000 customers. And it's an exciting time to be around in the industry. But yeah, my first company started back in 2006, and it was a crazy journey since then.
I love it. Going for the three-peat. So your first company was acquired by Salesforce, second by SurveyMonkey, and it's going to be interesting to see how Qualified plays out. Well on its way for either another acquisition or IPO or whatever you decide to do with it. What kicked off your entrepreneurial journey? It's always an interesting question to ask when we get guests. Like, you were just crazy enough to be like, I could build a huge company, or how'd that go down?
No. When everybody starts their first company, I think every entrepreneur out there has felt this way, that I don't really know what I'm doing. So when I got out of college, I immediately went to work for Oracle. And it was a time when kind of like the .com boom was booming, and the internet had just started impacting enterprise software. And Oracle at the time was like the biggest enterprise software company, I think, around, the number 2 software company in the world. I also had some experience that I got right after that at SAP. So boom, like 2 huge enterprise software companies. Made a run at a web services company that was super successful. And when that thing ran its course, I was like in my kind of 20s, and I'm like, I should go to business school. I think that's what I should do. And I had this also crazy co-founder, Sean, and Sean was like, what are you going to learn at business school? This is Silicon Valley. Like, let's just start a company. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? We'll get like 6 months into it and run out of money, and then go to business school. But you'll never get this chance to start a company. And so we really came to the table at that time with kind of 2 desires. One is we had a specific problem that we had kind of uncovered in the market. And 2 is we just had a desire to start a company. And so we're like, let's learn on the fly. And I think at that time, everybody was learning on the fly. The first company that I founded was called Keaton, and web services were emerging with SaaS apps at the time. And in go-to-market, in sales and marketing, which is, I know, the listeners of this show are all about go-to-market. Like, the number one service that was emerging on the internet with strong APIs was Salesforce. The number one marketing service that was emerging on the internet with strong APIs was Google AdWords. And so you had marketers spending a ton of money digitally. It was a huge shift. A ton of money was being spent digitally, specifically with Google. But if you're a B2B organization, you don't close your deals through e-commerce checkout. You got sales reps. And so there had to be this connective tissue between this kind of new emerging marketing platform, Google, and this new emerging sales platform, Salesforce. And we tied those 2 things together. And that was kind of like my start as an entrepreneur. That was my big start in cloud and SaaS. And it was like a super exciting time to be part of it.
I love that. I'm going to make the assumption you never made it back to business school.
Never made it back to business school.
I love it. I think you got 3 lifetimes worth of MBAs out of the companies that you've been a part of now, though.
Yeah, just in the first year. I mean, there's nothing like setting up shop in an apartment building in San Francisco and being part of the movement and being part of the conversations every day. It's something that you can't actually learn in business school, and the market is moving so fast. And at that time, the cloud and SaaS industry was just exploding. It was going so fast, and you almost just had to be part of it to know what was going on.
Totally. Totally. Okay. So your company, Keyed In, was acquired by Salesforce in, I believe it was 2006. And that
Right.
was really, really early days. I believe the App Exchange, if I remember correctly, like landed in 2005, the year before that. And they were making a pretty big push into mobile. Talk me through what was going on during that time period and what that acquisition was like. You just built your first company, and now this, what looks like going to be the next big thing knocks on your door and wants to acquire you.
Yeah, I think it was more, it was opportunistic, I think, for both sides. Yeah, we launched the company at an event called AppForce. It was a Salesforce event here in San Francisco. And we were on stage demoing the software, and all the powers from Salesforce were in the room. And after the demo, we got a call and we're like, hey, come talk to us. And we had some pretty quick conversations about being part of the journey with Salesforce. The reason I say it was opportunistic is I think that, we were just getting our company off the ground, and we had this huge opportunity to become part of this movement, right? The cloud and the SaaS movement. It was something that you dream of, actually being able to be part of an acquisition and being part of that movement. And I think Salesforce had the opportunity to be part of building this ecosystem. And they were, basically showing that there was investment in the ecosystem with Salesforce Ventures. There was M&A in the ecosystem, that this vibrant ecosystem could be developed. And then we were doing something really specific with Google. And at that time, Google was another major player in SaaS. It was Google Apps and Google Docs and Gmail were just coming into the enterprise. And obviously, as your listeners know, the entire Office suite is essential to go to market. And so you got CRM, and you got an entire Office suite and these two cloud leaders, and with kind of us in the middle. So it was obviously super memorable for me at the time, but that was really the start of my true understanding of the explosion of the SaaS industry. What we now look back on and call SaaS and cloud, people were calling all sorts of things at the time. And it's hard to remember, but there was a lot of pushback at that time to move your enterprise software to the cloud. People were like, it's not secure. You mean I'm going to put my customer data on an app on the internet? That's crazy. And so I think what we're seeing with the rise of AI now, and the skepticism and the hurdles that we have to jump through to move into this next phase, I can draw a lot of parallels to what happened kind of back in that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can remember that time period, and it lasted a long time, from pre-2006 to at least 2011, 2012. People were still skeptical of moving from on-prem to cloud. And yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit later about kind of this innovator's dilemma that we're at now with kind of AI and the parallels between the thinking that had to take place if you were selling on-prem software and this big transition into the cloud. But before we get there, so your company gets acquired. You then go in and you spend almost 5 years as SVP of product marketing. That ends up culminating into a promotion to CMO in 2011. And I mean, you're the CMO of Salesforce. They are now this SaaS cloud darling. I imagine all eyes are on you to deliver. What did it feel like stepping into a role like that at a company like that during that time?
Yeah, there were two big roles that, to be honest, I wasn't really qualified or prepared for. But I guess my experience in digital marketing and SaaS, that was kind of the major qualification at that time. And the first one was running product marketing. So originally I was a product manager, and then kind of I got anointed to run product marketing. And product marketing is kind of the core of the Salesforce engine. How do we take these product capabilities and explain them to the world in a way that they can understand them? First, it was Salesforce automation and people thinking of cloud computing like a utility and accessing apps over the internet. That was groundbreaking at the time. And then it went into other areas, like I mentioned, Office and Gmail and Docs, and this whole system tied together. And of course, then Salesforce expanded into customer service, which is, I think maybe now their number one revenue line, the Service Cloud. And it was a whole legacy set of apps and a whole legacy set of call centers and infrastructure that was going to move to the cloud. And then it went to marketing and on and on. and on. And, my memory of that time was, wow, like I got the opportunity of a lifetime, because I think Marc Benioff is actually the best enterprise product marketer that's like ever lived. Probably Steve Jobs is like the number one consumer product marketer that's ever lived. So to have had the opportunity to even like work together alongside a person like that was insane. But because that individual is so good at what they do, naturally what happens is like other great enterprise, marketers flock to that, like being in that world. And I was one of them. So we were surrounded by 20 or 30 of like probably the best enterprise software marketers, on the planet. And we all work together and we all learn from one another and we all push the industry forward together. So it was kind of the opportunity of a lifetime. When I was ultimately promoted to CMO, there was a whole nother world that I inherited around corporate marketing and PR and demand gen and pipeline. And that's kind of where I can actually tie why I started Qualified, like back to my moments as CMO there. But wow, like what a wild ride it was. Kind of like, the thought leadership around cloud computing really in, 15 years ago or so had really kind of just crossed the chasm and hit the mainstream market. And there was a flock to enterprise SaaS and cloud computing. And it was just, it was an incredible ride. But I remember thinking that no matter how fast you're growing and no matter how much of a leadership position you had, one of the things I learned from that is like, you can never rest on your laurels. Like there's always the next company that is going to disrupt you. There's always the next startup out there that's going to do something. And I think because of what Salesforce did to Siebel, which is like, they just came along and talked about what they were publicly doing. But Siebel, the old CRM company that probably very few of your listeners have ever heard of or used, like they used to be like the dominant CRM company. And so there was always this feeling of like, there's going to be the next company. And so there was the feeling in marketing of like, we need to have a nonstop drumbeat of relevancy. Like what made us relevant last year is not going to make us relevant this year. And that's, I think, why you see from Salesforce and all the executives there, this event roadshow and, product marketing and demos and this feeling like, man, we're in front of the pack, but we need to constantly be the thought leader.
Yeah. I mean, I think Salesforce has done such a good job throughout the years of keeping that drumbeat going. Like there's always new things happening. And I don't know if you're feeling this as well, but certainly with, OpenAI and Google now, that drumbeat now with the acceleration of AI seems to be getting exponentially quicker. We're now like, I can't remember what the snare drum thing, but we're rolling now. It feels like every day there's now these like fundamental, not just small announcements, like huge announcements. Do you think we're going to just continue that trend and that drumbeat's just going to get faster and faster in order to stay relevant?
I think so. We talk inside our company about AI years being like dog years. It feels like we just worked for the last year. And I'm like, oh my God, it feels like 7 years. And in like this period of time, this like continuum of innovation in enterprise software, there was like, at first there was kind of the SaaS movement, as you mentioned. And then there was like the mobile movement, like everything's going to have an app on your phone. And people were like, what? Enterprise software is going to have apps. And now you see it rampantly. And then there was social media, right? Which had a huge impact on enterprise SaaS. Like you can't log into an app now without seeing your profile picture, right? And you're engaging with other users in the app. That was like groundbreaking at the time. And then of course there was like the Internet of Things and connected devices. And you got manufacturing companies like car manufacturers, like with their automobiles connected to the internet. And people are like, what is going on? And, here we are through a number of these innovations. And here we have AI. And it's like moving faster than ever. And I think that makes it really hard for older established companies to keep their eye on the ball, because once you have customers and you have like, a legacy product, it is so hard to keep up with the pace of innovation. And I think that's what's pretty awesome about our industry is that no matter how big or how small you are, you always have a shot. Because if you're a brand new startup, what you have going for you is you have focus. You don't have a huge team. You don't have a ton of money, nobody has a lot of time, but what you do have is the ability to focus. And then you don't have the baggage of like 15 years of code and 15 years of customers that you're carrying into the future. So everybody's got a shot. That's what I think is so exciting about Silicon Valley right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does feel like that. It feels like this great leveling of the playing field. And yeah, let's kind of get into this idea of the innovator's dilemma. I think you teed it up pretty well. So drawing on the example of, Siebel Systems and Salesforce, I imagine, there was a point in time where Siebel looked around and they were like, okay, it is looking like cloud may be the inevitable future. Like, I'm sure there was meetings like that. But as you mentioned, like, in order for them to make those shifts, they are a huge company. They have to cannibalize a lot of their business. And that is just so hard to do. And it's like this sunken cost fallacy. We've done all of this. We know this motion. We've got these customers. They're still paying us. They've signed on for another year. Who knows about the year after that? But how do we stop and reset everything? And that's where the advantage goes to these startups and younger, nimbler, focused companies. And I think we're seeing the exact same thing now with some of these sort of incumbent players in name X category of SaaS. They'll have to maybe change their pricing completely. They'll have to restructure and re-architect their software from the ground up. And it feels like that trade-off is just really difficult for people to make. And would love to hear just kind of your take on what you're seeing and some of the parallels between the shift we had from on-prem to cloud.
It's so hard to cannibalize your own company. And, my experience just comes from, I worked for 3 of the largest enterprise software companies in the world. And I've started 3 companies with, 2 guys and a dog in a tiny apartment. So, and have seen kind of everything in between. And the innovator's dilemma, there was a book written about it. Clayton Christensen was the author. And has just been so relevant to me in the last 2 years that I went back and read it, or you can listen to it. And the idea is really simple. And that is like, when there's a major platform shift, the incumbents are very likely to like eat their own lunch. Like, there's so many forces in play inside of these companies to just keep things status quo. And it feels like overwhelmingly hard to think like a startup, or even like fun to start up inside of your own company, whose entire goal is to eat the lunch of like your cash cow. And so there's so many forces in play that companies don't do it. So, I mean, think back to the rise of SaaS. We all probably don't even remember that there used to be a dominant HR provider called PeopleSoft, or a dominant CRM provider called Siebel. And people, for their corporate email, they used something called Lotus Notes, and they would do file sharing with something called SharePoint. And like, all these companies and these products are gone, right? Or they're, let's call them not gone or not relevant in today's world. And today we got Gmail and Office 365, and we got Slack, and we got Rippling and Workday and Salesforce and everything else, right? But why didn't these companies that were in these leadership positions like get there? Like, how come they couldn't transform? And that's the innovator's dilemma, is it's so hard to do that. Well, guess what? Fast forward to 2022, the beginning of 2023, and you have AI. Okay, so it was like almost 2 years ago, almost to the day, that ChatGPT became the fastest growing app in the history of apps. And so on that day, if you're leading a software company or you're a CEO in the industry, you got to think, how is the world going to transform? How does my software need to transform? Is AI going to eat my lunch? And if so, I better be the guy to build it than to watch another startup do it, or to have some other competitor actually do it first. So it was almost like a call to action at that moment to change. And that's what I felt as a CEO. I felt this like crazy pressure to change. And it was right as we were all going into this B2B recession. I'm sure many of your, listeners to your show have felt the pain of this B2B recession that we've been in for the past couple of years, where VC money dried up, inflation spiked, everybody was cutting costs, they were cutting heads, they were cutting seats, they were cutting software. at the exact same time, like this huge platform shift and this innovator's dilemma happened with AI. So to be in this world of the last 2 years as a software company has been like nothing like I've ever seen actually since the .com like heyday and implosion. And now we're kind of on the other side of that. And we have this new platform with AI, but the innovator's dilemma, like that's what's shaken up our industry now. Like that's what gets me up every day and fires me up is the opportunity to build the next great company, because the people maybe that should have their eye on the ball, the incumbents, maybe they don't. And maybe that's like opportunity for a whole new set of startups out there to win.
Yeah. 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 We're seeing it firsthand. And, you can even look at, again, going back to Salesforce and some of the things that they're doing with Agent Force and things is you could look and be like, oh, that has the potential to disrupt all this other parts of your business, but they're, being bold enough to, take a stance and not pretend that shifts aren't happening. Do you see a world in SaaS? I think like one of the easier places to look at potential disruption is just pricing. And, these companies that are on the traditional seat pricing may struggle when new innovators come up and they're like, no, we're actually going to do usage, or better yet, maybe it's outcome based. How do you look at that shift? And if you were to predict the future pricing model of SaaS, what does it look like for you?
It's a really interesting question, because when you just again, like drawing parallel to the rise of SaaS and cloud, it was an entirely new model. Software as a service that never existed before. On-premise software was typically bought in a perpetual license with maintenance. And you had to invest, like if you wanted to stand up like Siebel, the old CRM system before Salesforce, you'd like spend $1 million or $2 buying the software. Then like you owned it, so to speak, and you paid for like updates. And then the SaaS model came and said like, there's a whole lot of risk in that. Isn't it better if you just like pay as you go? And then it should be on the software vendor to deliver the value to you and earn your renewal. Like that was game changing at that time. And here we are now at another paradigm shift with AI, and people are wondering the same thing. But as a software vendor, 2 to 3 years is all it takes for a whole new set of vendors to come in and emerge. So many software companies, I think, are sitting around like operating slowly, going like, oh, we got a year to figure this out, or we got like, a couple years. But you're going to blink, and then the next set of companies are going to like all of a sudden have a stronghold in so many of your customer accounts, and they're going to be looking to them for these new, like the new technology. They're going to be looking to them for the innovation. They're going to be looking to them for the new pricing model. So as a CEO, I feel this like sense of urgency, like to move. Pricing is one of those things. Now, if your company happened to sell a lot of seats, which a lot of SaaS companies did for 10, 15 years, you're immediately exposed if there's going to be an AI worker or agent who's going to perform some of that work. Okay, so this is like maybe like hurting people's minds a little bit, but imagine there's an AI logging in that's doing the work. That's actually what's happening, but there's no like UI, there's no UX to the software, right? But the AI is doing the work that a human formerly did, and you don't need to log in and buy a seat if you're going to have AI do it. Now, the question is, how much of that work can be done by AI? If the answer to that question is 100%, like you better not be on a seat-based pricing model. If the answer to that question is like 50%, okay, well, you kind of need to change. Now, the challenges with the kind of these new pricing models is they're scaring people, just the way software as a service kind of scared people. So you have one model where you like pay for outcomes. That's an example. And you have one model where you pay for consumption. That's kind of like a popular one right now. The problem in my experience in the last year of bringing AI agents to market is that buyers they're kind of scared actually of some of those models, not because they don't want to like pay for the outcome or pay for the consumption, but it's hard to fit within their budget. They don't know, like, what am I going to be paying a year from now? And like that level of uncertainty needs to be capped, I guess, in some way, so we can get to that level of comfort. The bigger trend that like I've personally witnessed in the last year is just like the idea that I'm paying for digital labor instead of paying for human labor. Like a seat was like a human sitting in a chair, right? That's why we called it a seat. It's a human sitting in a chair. Well, if you have digital labor, then the question is like, how does the digital labor potentially offset the cost of the human labor? And then what can the digital labor allow your team to do with the software that it couldn't do with human labor? In my company, we bring to market an AI SDR agent. Her name is Piper. She generates pipeline. And so she does two things. One is she offsets the costs of humans on the team performing work and allowing them to move on to other activities or higher value activities. And number two, she generates pipeline in a way and at scale that humans couldn't. So when you think about you're delivering a certain amount of value, you're offsetting some human labor costs. How do you price your software in a world where customers want some level of certainty? So we're all experimenting with these kind of like digital labor pricing models, these consumption pricing models, and in some case, outcome-based pricing models. I think inevitably, like that's the trend. It's not seats unless you happen to sell a product for which AI is not going to impact kind of the human usage of the software, which is probably not that many SaaS companies.
Yeah, man, I could geek out over this for quite some time. So you kind of breezed over something there that I want to dive into, because it did sort of break my brain when we were having our initial discussions. I think it was about a month ago, and I genuinely have been thinking about it, every day since, is this idea that the next generation of software companies, the human might not be your user any longer. You could have an AI agent logging into your systems, and then the per seat pricing completely, goes away. And also how you design products, how you think about UI, UX completely fundamentally changes. Can you talk through that a little bit and give some color to that? Because I think that's a world that's very interesting, right? Piper could be logging into your CRM. It could be learning from your enablement solution. It could be doing all these different things and doing just as much work as a human, or maybe 10x, 20x as a human. And so you need to think differently if you're that software provider that now has agents logging in instead of humans.
Yes. And in fact, the AI Piper, she's always logged in, right? She's always logged in and always learning and always working. And so the question is like, what are you setting her loose to work on? So for anybody out there who's like, created a product and sold a product or been part of bringing a product to market that was pre-AI, that you're designing it for some person. That could be like an HR professional for an HR app, or an employee portal, or it could be a customer portal, or it could be a sales app or a forecasting tool. Like ultimately you're thinking of like, who is the person that's who's the person that's buying my software? Who are the people that are using my software? And how do I set the software up so that the user can maximize the value they deliver to the company? And then the buyer of the software can understand like, what's the ROI on my investment? Am I getting value from this software? And so you kind of had a lot of software products that were designed, the UX was designed around a human. And then the reporting and analytics was designed around like being able to justify the costs and the return for the customer. Now we're in an entirely new world. And most software that was built before, 2022, you have to design that software for the AI and for the human, because you're still in a world where you have humans, right? And so you have like the digital labor working alongside the human labor, and the software has to accommodate that. In some cases, if the software can do 100% of a task, doesn't even have to be a whole job function, but a task, then the software needs to be designed to just be set up by like an administrator, one person that oversees the AI. Effectively in my world, it's like, who's Piper's manager? Well, Piper's manager, what does Piper's manager need to do? She needs to onboard Piper. She needs to train Piper. She needs to give it the rules of engagement. Hey, Piper, don't do this, do that. She needs to be given a ton of information. Hey, memorize my CRM database, memorize all my outreach sequences, know everything that's going on my website. And then she has to be like put to work. And then the work that she's doing could be having conversations on the website. It could be converting visitors. It could be booking meetings. It could be sending email, whatever it happens to be. Piper's job is now to generate pipeline. And so the administrator, the person setting her up, needs to ask the same questions that any manager would ask. Hey, Piper, what did you do today? Hey, Piper, how many customers did you work today? Hey, Piper, how many meetings did you book today? Hey, Piper, how much pipeline did you generate today? And so the software then has to have the ability to basically monitor what the AI is doing and be able to ask questions of why did you do this the way that you did it? Needs to be able to be given feedback like, hey, Piper, do it like this in the future, not like that. And of course, the administrator, the manager, the person who buys the software needs to know what's going on and be able to, again, justify the value of however the pricing model has been set up. But that's a pretty different way of thinking than the way we've been thinking about SaaS for the last 15 years.
It's incredibly different. And yeah, your job then becomes more just understanding the outcomes that the agent has driven, similar to how if you were running like a BDR team and you would see, okay, this rep is really good at maybe qualifying, but not so good, on follow-up. And then you kind of make little tweaks and you would just let Piper know, hey, the outcomes here aren't exactly what we wanted. Why don't we test doing it like this? And then you can run these crazy fast iterations of these tests and get to the outcome that you desire. And then it's not crazy to think you could have over time, once you've done that enough, an AI manager managing the AI agent, and then you're overseeing all of that.
Who knows where we're going to go? But, I think that I think that a huge value prop of AI and these AI agents and workers is they don't leave your team. So for example, my product, Piper, she works the marketing funnel. It's the inbound SDR function. So it's not the outbound stuff. And in this inbound SDR function, it's usually you hire young professionals like right out of school. They sit in that role for a year, like max.
Yeah.
You spend 4 months training them and onboarding, then you send them loose, and it's really hard for them to do their job, and they're young kids, and it's hard to get them to show up to the office or show up to work. Then the good ones, the amazing ones, they get promoted in 9 months. Some people decide, hey, sales marketing is not my jam. So they leave and they do something else. You're constantly training and constantly onboarding and constantly recruiting. It's this revolving door of people. And you're like, I could have an AI that's actually, I can just keep tweaking and changing and tuning and making better and better over time. She's never going to leave me. She's going to work nights and weekends. So the value prop is really compelling. But coming back to kind of your original question of how you need to design your software, we're operating in an entirely new world, which is why going back to the innovator's dilemma, who's going to bring this new world, to market? Is it going to be a new set of startups that are kind of on the younger side of their lifespan? Or is it going to be an older set of startups that are in their kind of middle age, or however you might, want to call it? And that's why it's really exciting right now. And that's why everybody's looking to a lot of these new startups. Now, I think Salesforce has done a phenomenal job with Agentforce. Their message is super clear. They've given a promise actually to bring, a billion agents to the world. They're helping to educate with hands-on workshops. So I feel Salesforce is one of those companies that they could bridge themselves to the other side because they've got technology and they've got a vision. But those of us who are out there and go to market, what we all really want to know is how to do it. What are the playbooks? How do we implement software? How do we change our go-to-market organizations to be ready for this new world, to operate in this new world?
Yeah. Which leads me nicely to kind of some of our final questions. And I love asking this question. I call it the silver bullet question, although, if we've been in this game long enough, we know there's no silver bullets. But, what is one tactic or strategy that is working for you right now at Qualified?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the tactic that's really working for us is the momentum that comes from the obsession on our customers. As an entrepreneur, as one of the co-founders of Qualified, I chose to be our first customer success manager, right? When you're a couple of guys sitting in a room, you got to divide and conquer. So I raised my hand and said, I'll be the first one to implement our customers. And when you're a small startup and you're acquiring your first 25 customers, you'll literally do anything for them because you need them more than they need you. And when you're going from like 1 million to 10 million in revenue, you have to obsess on your customers because you need them more than they need you. Like you need to know how to get product market fit. You need someone to take a sales reference. You need someone to take an investor reference. And then on and on and on. What happens is most companies actually, they like stop obsessing on their customers because they, for some reason, they're trying to reduce costs or they find product market fit and they turn their sights on something else. But like I vowed when I started Qualified and I felt that emotion, which is like, it's life or death as a startup. I need these customers more than they need me. I'm never going to forget how important the obsession on customers should be to a software company, because it should be our job to earn the renewal. It should be our job to show them the value. It should be our job to show them the ROI. That's SaaS. Like subscription means you have to work for your customer to earn every single renewal. And so that feeling of customer obsession, I think like we've turned that into something that's a huge advantage for our company. So I have this graphic that I talk about in kind of all of our all hands calls. It's called the momentum flywheel. And it starts with customer success. And if you can make your customers successful and you do it at all costs, you just go above and beyond. Most software companies do not go above and beyond. I'll tell you that. Having been in the industry, they just don't. They sell you the software, they implement it, they take off. They show up at renewal with a little presentation that says, I think you got some ROI. But they don't sit there and guide their customer into the future and make sure they're successful and just go above and beyond. And if you can do that, your customers turn into the raving fans, right? They give you the references, they write the 5-star reviews. When they leave their job, they go to the next job and they want to bring you in and they tell you where the product is deficient and that makes its way into engineering. And then you pump out the new features and capabilities. That's ammo for marketing that builds awareness into the market that helps you sell the next deal. And then it helps you make the next customer successful. It's this like flywheel. And if you can get it going by focusing everybody in your company on customer success, it can bring you through a B2B recession like we've just had in the last couple of years. And it can be the thing that it accelerates you in a time of growth, which is what we're in right now.
Totally. And every crank of that flywheel, it just grows stronger and stronger. It reminds me of a conversation I had with the chief customer officer of Canva. And he said, if you're in SaaS, you're not looking to make the sale. What you're really looking for is loyalty. And that's very true. You know, and that loyalty does not come without that customer obsession on, we are here to solve the problems that you're experiencing every day.
100%. Now, I think a lot of people say that. And so, for example, I wanted to show our company that we were different. So we made like an 8-foot tall neon sign. We went to Las Vegas and hired the company that makes all those huge neon signs in Las Vegas. And there's a huge neon sign hanging in our headquarters when you walk in that says whatever it takes, which is like the mentality that like, I'll just do whatever it takes to help my customer be successful on what we promised them in the sales cycle. And when you can do that, like what I've realized is very few enterprise software companies actually do it. A lot of people talk about it, but there's very few companies that are that committed to seeing and working hand in hand with the customer all the way kind of through the process. But as we all know in the enterprise, it's all about, people say business transformation, but it's like companies have to evolve. And we're in the age of AI right now. So who's going to help them do that? Mm-hmm. Who's going to like give them the playbook and the roadmap and guide them to the future? And of course, that's something I learned from my earliest days at Salesforce, which is like, you have to have trust. Trust is the number one thing. And if your customers trust you, like they'll give you a lot of leeway and you'll be the one that they call with their hard questions. I'm trying to get from here to here. My board's asking me to do this. How should I do it? And what are the vendors they trust to get them there?
Yeah. I think it was a Benioff quote. He says, trust is the currency of business, which I love. And yeah, I think it's part of why it's such an exciting time. And I think we keep going back to this, but again, with the parallels to the cloud shift from on-prem, certain companies were really seen as like a transformation partner. Like, take my hand and I'm going to walk you into this new world. And then that was how you were seen as like a good software vendor. There was a lot of people were scared. People didn't know what the future looked like. So you got to be this partner that ushered them into the new era. And then, maybe there was a little less innovation over the last, decade or so. And then we're all fighting for these like incremental gains, and you saw it change, kind of go to market a little bit. And it was more like a volume game. And we forgot that trust piece. And now I think as we go on this next huge transformation, it's going to be those software companies that are seen as a true trusted partner to walk us into sort of the unknown, which is, it feels like we're going into a big unknown again.
And so many buyers are calling BS on our sales pitches, and they're calling BS on our marketing. They're calling BS on our supposed product screenshots in our slide decks. I think now's the time when people need to see real software, and it's about the use cases. So as a software company, like that's what I'm doing as a CEO, is like I'm focusing on highly specific use cases with real software that I can demonstrate to a prospect and say, this is the piece of your go-to-market, then I can automate with AI for you. And now I want to educate you on how we've done it and how we've thought about it. I want to show it to you working in your environment, as opposed to like what a lot of software companies have done over the last couple of years is slap AI on their homepage and fill their pitch decks with AI and put out like kind of fake demo videos. But like, here we are, it's 2025 and the rubber's meeting the road. And I think our buyers are pretty educated and smart at this point in time. And we need to get down to brass tacks and show them the use cases in the real software.
Absolutely. So this is usually the part of the episode where I bring in a question from the listeners, but I'm going to hijack the question because I'm just super curious. And I think we got to one, but my question is, what was kind of the biggest learning that you had from Marc Benioff when you were working directly under him? I think you mentioned one, which is trust is the currency of business. What are some other learnings you had from Marc?
Probably other than trust is alignment. It's how we run our company. And one of the things that I kind of copied from him was an alignment framework called the V2 MOM. And another thing that I saw in the 2000s, Google actually had an all hands call every other Friday. They called it TGIF. And what they tried to do is they just said, our company is moving and changing so fast that a basic alignment framework is not good enough. We need to actually realign everybody like every other Friday, because everybody goes off and they do work, and like the industry changes and the market changes and the product changes and the competitive landscape changes, and we hire new people, and boom, we got to realign like fast. It can't be the end of a quarter. It can't be just like company kickoff once a year. Google was like, we got to do it every 2 weeks. So the alignment framework from Salesforce and Benioff is called the V2 MOM. It stands for vision. Where are you going? What's your North Star in a year? Values. What's important as you go on that journey together? Methods, which are what are the priorities of your company in the next 90 days? Obstacles. What's going to keep you from getting there? And measures, which is how are you going to know if you've been successful or not? And what I've seen using that framework is it works for tiny little startups, and it works for Salesforce, the largest enterprise software company in the world with close to 100,000 employees. And that framework of alignment, what I have found is it helps motivate the employees. If the employees know where we're going and what the priorities are, and everybody in the company can see how they ladder up and connect to like what we're all doing together, it feels like we're on one team and we're trying to accomplish the same goal. And then transparency, right? Transparency is actually what breeds trust with your customers, but also trust with your employees. The transparency to articulate every other week, like Google did, like, how are we doing against these? Why are we doing this again? Let me re-educate and let me handle objections and questions from the employee base. So that framework has been crucial to the success of Qualified. And we started using it when we were 10 people in a little room, and we're using it today as we have hundreds of employees. And that's going to be the thing that we use as the company continues to grow. So it's the combination of like the V2 MOM combined with these regular all hands meetings where you're completely transparent with everybody in the company. Basically what
Yeah.
you end up with is if you can align and point everybody in the same direction, you get the maximum value of cranking that flywheel, right? If you can keep your employees educated and motivated, it means they're going to deliver the most for the company. So it's all about like showing up to work every day and align. And that's how we create the most value together as a team.
That's great. And we'll try and find some material on the V2 Mom framework, and we'll put it in the show notes. And if it doesn't exist somehow, maybe we'll collaborate together on a GTM newsletter and write it out. But that was great. So it was vision, values, method, obstacles, and measures. Is that correct?
Yep, exactly.
I love that. All right. Kraig, this has been awesome. Thanks for sitting down with me. I just have one final question, and this is kind of the hot take question. What is one widely held belief that revenue leaders or founders still believe to be true that you think is bullshit, or at least no longer serving us?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I'm sure other guests on your show have said this before, but the one that is so top of mind for me right now is this age-old saying called hire fast, fire fast. And I happen to be, leading a company where, we're going to grow 50 to 100% next year. And what does that mean? I'm scaling my go-to-market team. What does that specifically mean? I want to put more quota on the street and I want to hire amazing account executives. Now, if we had the belief that we should hire fast and fire fast, what that basically says is we're not looking for like the best of the best candidate. We'll actually trade off like certainty on somebody who's an exceptional fit for our company with somebody that, like, I don't know, we haven't put them through all the paces. Remember, because we're hiring fast. So like a button a seat is more important than finding the right individual, which is going to take longer. But I just wanted to maybe articulate like how I think about that as the CEO. And I think about, okay, so let's say we hire somebody fast. And we're not, the probability of them succeeding in our company is not 100%. It's not 80%. It's more like 60%. Okay. So we put somebody in seat faster, which means we can get quota on the street faster. But if you actually take a look at what happens if you get that decision wrong, it's number one, first, you give them the job offer, they sign it. You have to wait for them to start. That's usually a few weeks. You have to onboard them, right? That's like a few weeks from your HR team. Then you got to send them through like sales boot camp. That could be like 30, 60, 90 days. At some point, and then you're like certifying them on your pitch and your messaging. And then you start to ramp them into quota. And what happens is you start giving them pipeline, the pipeline that your company paid a ton of cash to actually generate, right? And maybe they're not phenomenal at handling that pipeline, or maybe they don't work the way that like you sort of expect because you skipped a couple of those steps in the interview process. Well, like, what's the cost of hiring the wrong person? Well, you give them 4 months of opportunity before you realize, hey, we might have a performance problem. And then you go through a couple of weeks of coaching, then you're on like a 30-day PIP. And when you separate, you're then paying them like 6 weeks of severance. And then you're going back to recruiting and saying, please source me a new candidate. But what have you lost? Sure, you've lost a ton of money, but you've lost a bunch of time from your sales leaders who need to be like focused on execution in the market. And there's the opportunity cost, because what else could you have done in that 6 to 9 months if you had just slowed down a little bit and made certain you were hiring the right person? And I think I probably, stole this from somebody else I read in a book or something, but it's like, if my opinion is, if you're on the fence about hiring somebody, if you say, I think we can get them there, then just stop right then and recognize that it's probably not the right fit for your organization. And hiring slow and hiring deliberate means you're probably going to increase the probability of success for many of these candidates. And everybody's got a different hiring profile, but since we're talking about go-to-market, that's just the thing that's top of mind for me right now as our company's scaling in the next year.
I think it's a great call out. And, as someone in venture, we are all obsessed with this idea of the power law, right? And it doesn't matter if I take 500 meetings and I haven't done a deal in 4 months, but I just wait until the right company comes and you find that. And then it doesn't matter that you spent 3 months to find it, because, it's going to drive an insane amount of the returns or the outcomes. And I think thinking of the power law in terms of talent is a good way to think of it too, and if you're losing out on a potential 100x hire because you just feel like you need to get a butt in the seat, like the opportunity cost is way too high. So I think it's a great call out. Well, Kraig, I guess before I let you go, are you currently hiring AEs? I think some listeners might want to know that information.
Yes, 1000%. We are hiring AEs. We're hiring SEs. So you can contact me, Kraig at qualified.com. You can go to our website and apply, or you can find me on LinkedIn and I will respond. It's crucial to us right now. We're hiring everywhere in our go-to-market, AEs and SEs specifically.
Beautiful. Any top 1% AE listeners out there, go work for this man, go work for this team. Thanks for jumping on, man. This has been super fun.
Scott, thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Beautiful. And to all our listeners, I say it every week, listening's one thing, executing something totally different. Hopefully we spurred some ideas, tactics, strategies that you can go and implement in your own company. And we will see you all next week.